In this video I'm going to show you how to use a pivot table, a basic pivot table in Excel to analyze some data, and this data is about a survey conducted into what people thought about the national minimum wage rates in the UK. So the data I'm looking at is quite confusing. Let me just give you a quick tour. There's an identifier number in the first column just so that every response has a unique number, and it's anonymous, and then it asks about gender and age, location, and which sector the responder works in, and there's a whole bunch of questions about what they think about national minimum wage rates and what they think they are. There are a few confusing things to notice. The numerical answers, like the ones I'm clicking on now, people estimating some wages, but if they didn't know the answer they could have picked I don't know, and that gets recorded in a different column, which is possibly a bit confusing, but it means there's lots of gaps in the data here which you may need to take account of. What I'm going to demonstrate first of all very basically is how to use a pivot table to get some information out of this. Now pivot tables are incredibly powerful, and this is just a quick introduction to the sorts of things you might want to try. But let's do this simply first by clicking anywhere in the data and going to the Insert tab and clicking on Pivot Table. When I do that, you immediately see it's selected all the data, and that's backed up by this little box here. You could choose just a section of the data, but if you're in a large data table it tends to guess that you mean all of it. That's what pivot tables are really for. So that's what this first option is telling us, and then down here it's telling you where do you want to put this pivot table. I think it's a good idea to put it in a new worksheet so we've got a separate space to work on this. Let's just go ahead and do that now, and you get a rather unexciting blank window, but you do get an interesting list of options on the right hand side, and you can see all the columns are here with tick boxes. So I'm going to click the tick box for the sector which people work in, which is the fifth sort of descriptive question. And if I just tick it, what it's done is it's put this question into the rows box. There's these four fields down here which you can have a play with. It's put it into the rows thing because that means I've now got a row for each of the possible responses for this which sector do you work in. Now it's not telling me very much, but it has listed all the possible options in alphabetical order, which is quite neat. What I'm also going to do is grab that D5 question and put it into the values box as well. I can just drag it in there instead of ticking it this time. And you see this time it's got another column which is the count of the question D5, and it's actually telling me that there were 14 people who said they worked in aerospace and defence, and 17 that worked in agriculture and fishing, and so on. So this is quite a useful way to get a quick summary of the data without you having to work too hard and do your own formulae. And you can see that it is listing everyone's numbers. There's loads of people in the other category, but it's telling me how many in total are there as well. So there's a quick introduction to how to use a pivot table. Before I leave this video, you can use a pivot table very basically to upgrade this sort of information. Let's say I also click on the question which asks about male or female, and if I just tick it, it's put that into the rows category as well. Now you could have dragged it in there, but ticking it puts it by default into the rows category. And you can now see that it's still counting the responses to the sector question, but it's also splitting it up by female and male. So there are 14 in aerospace and defence, but 5 of them were female and 9 were male, and it's done that all the way down. And this starts to be a bit more interesting. For example, you can see that lots of things are roughly equal, but then sometimes, occasionally, maybe in the construction thing, we've got a male-dominated area just there, which is not too much of a surprise. Now, it's important to recognise how the pivot table is doing this. If you change the order of these two things, which you can do just by dragging like I've done there, it does categorise in another order. So it's listed all the female things and their working places, and then the male things. So it's just doing it in the other order. And anytime you've got a group like this, you can collapse and expand it by clicking the minus or plus as that. So there's an introduction to how to create a basic pivot table in Excel.